Hello, so lighting in game development is so important. It almost entirely decides the mood of the scene. So today I've created this video to help cover everything you should know about lighting here in Godot. When we get to the tutorial section of this video, we will be starting with this basic scene. And throughout the process, we'll learn so much about the Godot lighting system, while we add different lighting effects to that base scene to make something more lively. Here's the layout of this Godot lighting tutorial, just in case you want to skip ahead or just see what we will be covering today. Remember to subscribe to help other aspiring game developers, and let's begin this video by talking about why lighting is so important, and don't worry, I'll explain this quickly. So lighting in any game or movie will almost entirely determine the mood of that scene. For example, look at this 3D project that was posted on Reddit by ScourgeOfficial1. Now this photo here is the exact same scene, with the only difference being the lighting. I understand that that is a 3D example, but even in 2D, this is the same concept. For example, in the scene that we're going to be working in today, we have this base platformer scene. Then if we end up adding in a ray of light here, it gives the scene a whole different feel. Now our player kind of feels like they're in some sort of cave and there's a whole world out there to explore. Then maybe we add in a larger ray where we want our player to go to. It gives the effect that there is more to see that way, and the player will feel like they need to go explore over there. Basically, we go from a dark, bare platformer scene to a dark, mysterious cave, which is leading our player to something more exciting to discover. Now keep in mind, this scene is only black and white, so color would bring this scene so much more life. But let's move into learning how to create lighting here in Godot 4. Okay, so we're going to start off this tutorial simple, right? Now we're in the tutorial section of this video, and we're going to start it off pretty simple. So what do we have in our scene? What is in our project before we even start adding light? Before we add anything to do with light, what do we have? Well, we have a platformer, we have a quick player with a sprite 2D, a collision shape, and the basic Godot movement script. And then we have a platform that I created with some Godot icons, which is some sprites, and we threw them together just like this and made them black. But if we took that away, you'd see that they are just literally the Godot icon. So we'll keep it like that. And then we want some light coming through here. We're going to want some light coming through here. We're going to want to do some different effects, right? So we're going to go through all this throughout this entire tutorial. Right now, let's add the most basic version of light. The most basic version of light that we can have is going to be done with a point light and a light occluder. Why do we need a light occluder? Why are these in the same tutorial section, the same chapter of this video? Well, because they go together. The light occluder goes with every other light source in the entire Godot engine, right? Because what is the light occluder? That's what we should probably be talking about first. But the light occluder is what casts shadows. So that's why it's important, because if you want shadows in your game, you're going to need a light occluder, or it's going to look a little bit funny. For example, in the intro, you saw this clip. But if we look at the editor version of that clip, we can see these light occluders placed about, which are stopping the light and casting the shadows you see. If we take the light occluders away, this is what that scene would look like. So it would look a bit funny and it wouldn't look right. So it's actually pretty easy to get these set up. So what I'm going to do to start getting these set up is I'm going to create another static body just to act as sort of a folder to store all of our light occluders in. And we can just say something like, okay, well, light occluder nodes, right? So this is where we're going to store our light occluder nodes. Then we can come up here and we can add in a light occluder, right? So this is what we're first going to be going over. But in this entire tutorial, throughout this entire video that you are currently watching, we're going to go over the point light, the direction light, the light occluder, and we're also going to go over the world environment node right here. But we'll get to all that later. So the light occluder. Let's add this to the scene. How do we want to go about this? What is going to happen? Well, once we add this, nothing's going to happen because we don't have any light. We have no point light, no direction light, nothing to actually cast light to show these shadows. But we are going to be creating the areas that are going to cast these shadows. So when we do create light, we can set it up properly, right? So for the light occluder, we have added it to our scene tree. We click on it. We come over here to the occluder. We can click on empty and click on new polygon 2D, new occluder polygon. It's like if you've ever made a polygon collision or collision polygon and you have to come up here, you got to click on this, create a new resource, and then you come down here and you just click somewhere on your screen and you end up getting a line and you get to draw out where you want that area to be. That's what we do with the occluder, right? Now, if we come all the way around, we create a simple square here. You're going to see, okay, well, what's going to happen? It doesn't look like anything happened. If we click away, there's nothing even there. What happened? Well, there is actually something there. It's just blends in with our scene. So if we click on the light occluder and we pull this away, you're going to see that we do have a little area there. So if we put that back, we're going to have that area, and we're going to end up having, if light comes here, it's going to hit here, and it's not going to go to this area. It's going to stop, and it's only going to come around it if it's not hitting this area. So basically, in turn, casting a shadow, which is super important. So I'm going to go and create two more light occluders. I'm going to create one up here It's going to take over all this area because remember, we're going to have light over here. So we're going to need this to block some light to cast a little shadow here. And then up here, of course, we're going to have light coming through here. So we're going to have to cast a shadow with this piece and cast a shadow with this piece so the light doesn't just flow through the entire thing and look like a big old rectangle coming through. Instead, it's coming through like a piece of pie, right? So I'm going to do these quickly because it's going to be the exact same as this light occluder. I'm going to do it in a time lapse so you can watch me, but I just want to save you a bit of time. Okay, so we have 3 light occluders now in our game. You can see the 3, and these are all going to end up casting shadows. They're all created the exact same way that we made the first one, but I want to go over one more light occluder because we need one more light occluder, and we're going to add that to our player because, of course, our player is going to end up casting shadows. So even if a light occluder is put into a different scene, it's still going to work in that other scene, right? Because we're going to have a light source in the other scene, but we are going to have a light occluder on our player, which is going to be instanced within that scene, right? But it will still work within that scene. So light occluder, we're just going to trace out the player because we want the entire player's body to end up casting a shadow if it is within the light, right? So we can go something like this, keep it pretty basic because it's not going to really affect it if it's a bit off. But there we go. Now we're going to have a light occluder. If light's coming this way, it's going to cast a shadow on the backside of the player and it's going to look good. So there's the light occluder. We go back to the world. Now, since we have the light occluder set up, we are ready to go and start adding light. Okay, so the most basic way to create light and probably the main way to create light here in Godot is going to be with the point light 2D. Now, there are multiple ways to create light, right? We have the point light, we have the direction light, but the main way that you're probably going to use most of the time in your Godot journey is going to be the point light. So let's learn about the point light now. It's also one of the most simple ways and is probably the easiest way to create light here in Godot. And it's going to take about 2 seconds to set up, but then just like everything in game development, you have to sit there and tweak it and move it around to make it look perfect, right? But we can come up here, we can end up adding in a new node, and it's going to be the point light 2D, right? So up here, you can type in point light 2D, add that to your scene, and then what are we going to want to do next? Well, we're going to need to add some sort of texture, whether that's going to be your own texture. Like, for example, a texture that you could make is like a white circle, right? A white circle would be a light. Maybe you need it for a torch. Maybe you want to make like a custom torch light. Maybe you want to create something that's custom, right? And it's like perfectly custom for your game and it's going to look perfect, right? That's a little bit more complex. Today, we're going to keep it on the simpler side because this is a beginner's guide to lighting here in Godot. So we're just going to go up here to the texture and we're going to say, okay, let's create a new gradient texture 2D. So we're going to use everything here within Godot to create light. And we're going to see a square pop up. If we drag this square out, you're going to see that we have light. There is light here. There is light that we have, and now like we're done, right? We have light. No, but there's a lot more that we have to do, and let's go over everything that's in the inspector, all that is like super important for you to know, and everything like that. So we have a target scale. A texture scale here. What's texture scale? Well, let's take a guess. It's probably going to scale this up, right? And that's what it does because it's going to scale the image or whatever texture you have. So if it's your own custom, let's say it's your own custom sprite, that's going to be useful. The texture scale will be useful for that. But for us, since we're on a gradient, we can actually come down here and change the width and everything for ourselves. So maybe we want it to be, let's say 1,500 long, and then let's say maybe 1,200 tall, right? And then that's going to be our, for example, our size. That's how we're going to change the size with a gradient. But remember, if it's a sprite that you imported, you can't really do that. So you got to use that texture scale. Okay, but so now that we have this, we can move it around. You can kind of see that we do have light. Light is working. You see our shadows aren't working. Why is that? Well, let's take a guess. Well, if we come down here in our inspector, we come down here to the shadow area. It's under the light 2D area. We come down into the shadow and we click enable. You're going to see instantly we're going to have shadows. Instantly there's shadows. And how that's going to work, you move this light source around. This right here in the middle is going to be the light source. Anything that we put shadows on, you see the players casting a shadow as well. But you see the things that we did not cast a shadow on, the light goes right under. And it just doesn't even count those as like being there. So that's why it's important to cast those shadows. Right? So maybe we can go and say something like, for example, if this was a real game, maybe, and your camera was going to zoom out past this black, maybe you want this to be a shadow too, so you can't see this light down here. But for this little example that we have, it doesn't really matter. Maybe we want our light to be here. We want it to kind of be shining in, maybe like it's like, I don't know, like this is like the ending. We want to show that this is the ending of our scene. But let's go over some other stuff that we have. So in the light 2D, what do we have? Well, we have an enabled. It enables the light. So is the light enabled or is it disabled? So you can do that from code if you needed to. Editor only. If you turn this on, basically it's not going to work when we run the game. So if we click play, you're going to see that we're going to have no light there. But if we turn this off and we click play, we are going to have that light there. So it basically turns it on and off. The color, we can change the color of the light that's emitted. So maybe we want like a nice little pink light. We can click play and you're going to see that we're going to have that pink hint to the light. Let's leave it at white for now. Energy is going to end up being like the strength or the brightness of that light. So let's change it to 5. You're going to see how much brighter that light gets, right? And then we can change that. Blend mode is going to kind of, it's weird. So this, we're adding light. If we change it to subtract, we're going to be subtracting light and it's going to make it darker. And then mix does some weird things. Don't really know what's going on there, but you can kind of see that for yourself. But we can see add, so we want to add some light, right? And then we have shadow, which you can change the color. It kind of changes the outline of the shadow. And then we have filter, which is kind of performance. You want it to perform quick, average, slow. If you have it at slow, it's going to make the shadow more blurry, more slow, right? And fast is going to make it quicker, more sharp. Transform, just like any other node, we have all of our basic node 2D functions down here. We come up, we have use HDR. This is important, but we're going to end up going over that whenever we go over the world environment node, because that's where we can kind of use that. But it depends on the hardware you have on your computer and stuff like that. So it gets a little bit more complex, but we'll go over that when we go over the world environment node. And then we can come down here to fill, which is just going to kind of basically be gradient options, right? So this is not really the lighting option. This is more of just a gradient option. All this stuff up here is just for the gradient. And then we have down here, let's see, what did we not go over yet? That should be about all that we need to go over, right? So that looks good. Oh, also, what we're about to go over now is this right here. So we can move these around and it kind of moves the entire light around. And that's how we're going to actually create the custom in our light, right? Because right now it's just a square. It's not really anything fancy, not really anything like that. So maybe we want our light source. You can kind of see that this square, this is another thing we need to go over. You see this square here? This square is exactly mimicked by this square. So you see this ray of light right there. If we move this, you see that ray of light actually move. We move the black, you see that darkness move closer. Now we have such a tight gradient into the black from this, right? And then of course we can change these colors by going down here and creating a new gradient, doing all that, but we don't really need that. We just need white, and then we can have the black kind of fade out wherever we want it to. Maybe we want it to fade out right here. And then maybe we need to go here and kind of create these light waves. So maybe we want it to look like this, but maybe we want it to actually come all the way like into the room. To do that, we're going to actually have to create the width a bit longer. So maybe we can go 2500. You're going to see that. And then it's going to create that light all the way into our room. Maybe we want it to look something like this. So it doesn't go all the way in. It casts a shadow here, casts a shadow here. We can kind of see shadows, but at the same time, it also fades out before it looks a bit too strange, right? So maybe we want something to look like this. That looks like a good piece of light, but then you're going to see it's going to cut off right there and it's going to look like sharp. So how do we fix that? Well, it's all depending here, because you see here, this light is still hitting the edge of our little square. So if we move this up a bit, maybe like this, we want all that to end up ending black, so it kind of fades out on like all together. It kind of all fades out. Click play, kind of see how that looks. That kind of looks like there's a ray of light coming from over here. It kind of tells our player, hey, let's go check out what is over here. You can see our player is casting that shadow as well. And that's about all there is to really know about the light point. But we're going to go and create one more together. We're going to create like a more defined beam of light, like a more bright beam of light coming down from the top. Kind of go about how to do that. But remember that color rect that I was talking about in the very beginning, how it only appears on color rects. There's no light. But the light only appears when we have that color rect over the area, right? Okay, but to create the other light, we're just going to go up to our world and we're going to add in another point light 2D. And this point light 2D is going to be a gradient texture. We're going to be able to go about this one much quicker now, since we kind of know what the point light is and how to use it. But what are we going to want to do, right? So try and do it on your own. See if you can do it. Pause this video. See if you can create like a more dense beam here. And then I'm going to go about it and I'm going to create it and show you how to do it, right? So, and let me know if you got it or not. Okay, so let's go about how to create it. So this is how we're going to do it. We're going to go up here, we're going to click on this, and we are going to make this, since we are going to be becoming like more of like a straight up and down line. It's not going to be such a wide brightness. We can make our width maybe 400, and then we can make our height super long, right? I meant to do 1,600 there. Super long. Now we can move this to where the bottom is going to kind of be hidden the bottom of our ground, and then maybe we can add a little bit of rotation in there so it kind of looks like rays of light are coming in from like a sun or some bigger object outside of our cave area. And then you're going to see, well, that doesn't look very good because it's kind of gradient. It's starting solid this side and kind of ending on this side. Well, remember, we can come over here to our texture and we move these dots around. This is the white dot, this is the shadow dot. So we can kind of say maybe we want it to fade out here, and then maybe we want the light to be about right there. So it's like a more strict sort of gradient there. It's more like there's less time for it to fade out, right? And then what else do we need to do? Well, we need to add shadows, of course. So we can come down here to shadows, enable the shadows, and you're going to see how that's going to look. It's going to kind of add that beam of light, but that beam of light doesn't look the best. And why is that? Well, you see right here, we have this shadow because it's hitting the edge. How are we going to fix that? Well, you see this is where the light's coming from. So if we move this down closer to the hole like this, you're going to see it's going to take up that whole space. If we move it higher and higher up, it's going to end up taking up less of that space. So if we put this right at the filling of the hole, about right here, you're going to see that we're going to have a more strict beam of light. Maybe we want it to kind of be facing more towards one way, like this. And that's going to kind of be like a beam of light coming through. And then maybe we want it to be a bit more solid, so we can come down here and we can change the energy level to 2. That's going to make it a bit more bright. If we click play, see how that looks. You're going to see we have a strict like sunlight ray, and then we have more of like a light, like, oh, there's another room over here that's like shining into this dark cave, right? There's another room that's shining some light over here. So let's go check out what room is over here that's shining that light, right? So that's kind of the two effects that we have going on in this scene. But if we come out of our game right there and we come over here and we toggle our shadows, you're going to see the difference that those shadows make, right? Again, we went over this in the intro, but that is super cool because now you can kind of look at it yourself in your own project. Okay, with that being said, you have just created your first light here in Godot. If this is your first time ever creating light, good job, because we just went over the point light and light occluders, and now we're casting shadows and we have light sources and we're pouring light into our scene, right? And you kind of understand the basics of lighting. Maybe you can go and create lights on your own now, right? But there is more that I want to cover in this video that are very important, basically classified as the basics of lighting, right? So we're going to go over the world environment node, and then we're going to go over the direction light 2D node as well later on in this video. So right now we're going to move into the world environment node, and we're going to kind of amplify our current scene, because right now if we were to click play, you're going to see our scene, it's cool, it looks good, but the lights all work and everything, but it's kind of bland, it's boring, there's not really much going on, the player is kind of basic, like everything's just bland. But there are ways that we can amplify this, maybe add some bloom, maybe add some glow, some different stuff like this that's going to really make our game kind of pop a little bit more. So that's what the world environment node is going to be good for, and we're going to move into that now. And it's useful for 3D, 2D, whether that's a 2D platform or 2D top down, anything that you're creating in Godot, that is useful for, because it affects the visuals. So it is very important whenever you're messing with lighting, because it really does affect the lighting and the mood that your game kind of gives off. So let's move into the world environment node and let's learn all about that next. Okay, so to do our world environment node, to work it, how are we going to go about it? Well, first of all, it's not going to be like huge change, but it is going to be kind of like a post-processing effect that you can add to your game. So that's the reason I want to go over it in this lighting tutorial. But basically what we can do is, if we go up here to our world, also I want to mention that this is a new scene. It's called World 2, but really it is World 1. I just kind of duplicated the scene so that we can go from this scene and then go back over to this scene and kind of see the difference between them. But if we go to World 2 and we add in that world environment node, we can come over here to the world environment node and we can add in a new environment. We can click on our new environment. We can go to our background. We can create our very first background. This is kind of how it's going to affect how it displays on the screen. And we're going to actually today use a canvas. Canvas is probably the most basic background that we can use, or the most basic mode background. You can see that we have sky and stuff like that, but that stuff is going to allow us to control fog and other stuff like that, which is actually I want to go over in a more advanced lighting tutorial. So I'm going to be uploading that in a week or so. It's going to be a lot more advanced. It's going to kind of go over everything that you see here. It's going to be a bigger world environment, almost like a post-processing video, right? That's going to be the complete video. It's going to be a lot more advanced lighting. So this is the basics. Today we're going over the basics so that you have an understanding whenever we go to that, or whenever you see that next tutorial, which is going to be a more complex lighting tutorial. You are already going to have the knowledge you need to kind of learn more advanced lighting. So that's the whole point of today. But what do I want to go over with this world environment? Why are we even have this like in our why are we even in a world environment node right now? Why are we using it if it's like advanced, right? Well, we can use some features, and we're going to use some stuff like the glow and some of that today, because it really can make the game look so much better with just like, I think we're going to change like 4 or 5 settings, and it's going to make the game look so much better. So let's actually do it right now. So if we come down here to the tone map and we change our mode to ACES, what this is going to do is it's going to have a white variable as well instead of just exposure. Exposure is going to make it brighter, and then if we go under 1, it's going to make it darker, just like exposure does in like a photo editing software. And then the white is going to just kind of make the white stand out. So let's say we go to like a little under 1, a little under 2, you're going to see the white is going to stand out more than the black stands out. And then the exposure, we can say, okay, let's do 0.8, because let's kind of darken the scene even more, but let's keep that white shining bright, right? So it kind of looks like the white is still the same, but the darkness behind is just overall darker. And then if we were to click play, what's going to happen there? Well, you're going to kind of see the entire game looks darker, but the player stays the same, and the rest of the scene the lights stay the same, and the player stays the same, but the rest of it gets darker, which is exactly what we wanted, right? But there's more to this. We can add a little glow by going down here to the glow, enabling that, normalizing it, changing up the intensity of our glow maybe to 1.2. We can always come back and change it. Then we can change maybe the bloom to half 1, like 0.5, and then we can play, and you can kind of see the player is now glowing, right? So it kind of stands out more. The shadows, of course, are going to look like they looked in the previous examples, but everything looks more, it almost like this scene almost has more life by just changing 4 different settings, which is really, really good, right? So you can go with this, you can add in this world environment, you can kind of play with some of this, but I want to make sure that you understand that I'm going to be creating an entire tutorial on this world environment node in the future, like very near future. So it's going to really be able to change the look of your game like that. But if you look at this, you can kind of see the difference that it already has made. So we see this scene, then we go back to world 1. You see how plan and plain this looks. It kind of like, I don't know if it's just me seeing it or if it's just the way I see it, but like this looks more plain, more plain, more mundane than if we were to go over here. This scene just looks like it has a bit more life going on. It looks like the rays are more real. It looks like the player just stands out a little bit more. If you look like right here, you can kind of see like this glow. I don't know if you can see that, but you can kind of see how it gets darker whenever the player runs away from this area right here. You see this circle, and then it comes down. Whenever our player goes over there, it kind of lights that area up because it's so dark. So that's kind of like the glow. It gives our player a sort of glowing effect, right? But I think that looks a lot better. Now, also the HDR, if I would talked about that earlier in this video, that I would go over that. So the HDR, if we go to project settings, and then we go to advanced settings, and we say HDR, and then we come down here to viewport, and you're going to see this HDR 2D. I'm not actually going to click it because I do not have a HDR monitor, but HDR kind of stands for height dynamic range, and it's basically how bright your monitor can show. So if you have a super bright light and you have an HDR monitor, then it's really going to show that. But if you have an SDR monitor, it's this setting right here, turning this on, it's going to mess up like the colors, the way the colors are shown. So I wouldn't recommend it if you have an SDR monitor, but if you do have an HDR monitor, then I really recommend you going to check out this this setting right here, because it really is a game changer, and it makes the colors like really like fruitful, like they're really bright, and it looks super good. But just wanted to mention that in case you do have an HDR monitor. But yeah, we just changed like 4 settings, and the game looks almost completely different. It looks like a completely different game. It looks like we used completely different art, but really we didn't, right? But the world environment node, like I mentioned, is so complex, so I'm actually working on that more advanced lighting tutorial. But now I want to move into a little explanation about the directional light 2D, and we're going to add a directional light 2D to this scene and see how that directional light affects the scene that we are currently working on. Okay, so what is the directional light node in Godot good for? Well, it's good for creating light that is supposed to be far away from like the surface, like the sunlight or the moonlight, which we don't really have in this project that we're working on. So we are actually going to use it for this project as almost like an atmospheric fill, right? So maybe we can make a slight moonlight tint to our game, and it's going to feel like we have moonlight dripping into the cave, right? So to do that, we can come up here to our world 2, and we can end up adding in a new node, and that's going to be our directional light 2D. You're going to automatically see it's going to brighten up the entire space, right, instantly. So if we hide this, that's the entire difference. It's huge already, right? And it's just such a little change that we've made. It's just like an entire light. It kind of lights up the entire scene no matter what is there, right? So if we move also remember, if we come up here to our platform and we move that color rect, it's only going to appear on our color rect as well, just like every other light here in Godot. But if we come down here to our directional light, what are we going to do? How are we going to go about setting this up to make it look like a slight moonlight is like coming into the game? So we can come up here to shadow, which you would not want for example what we're doing now, but you have the ability to add that shadow. For example, if you wanted to create more of like a daylight scene where it's like an open world and you wanted the trees to have shadow, you'd almost use a directional light, and then you'd add shadow, and then you'd add the trees to kind of show off a little shadow, right? Hopefully that made sense. But we are going to use the directional light to kind of just add a fill to our game. So how are we going to go about that? Well, we can go to our color, and then we can come over here, and maybe we want like blue. You can see how it tints the entire thing. We want some sort of blue for moonlight, right? Maybe like this sort of blue. That's actually almost perfect. We can make it a bit transparent, so it's like just barely there. Maybe we can, if we look at the blend mode, what's subtract going to do? If we had to take a guess. What's on the opposite side of the color wheel than blue? It's going to be orange, right? So it's actually going to make everything an orange tint, which is really, really weird, right? Because blue is opposite of orange on the color wheel, so it's going to be like basically the opposite of what it currently is. But that's just what I don't know why I even said that, because it really doesn't matter, right? But we have the energy, right? We can make it brighter and everything like that. But for this, we don't really need it to be brighter. And the max distance, that all that stuff is kind of left, because it's almost like if you're using a directional light, it's almost like you want everything. You want everything in your project to get this light, and it's all going to come from up here at the top. So it's like a ray of light is coming from here, ray of light is coming from here, ray of light is coming from here, here, like all over your project that ray of light is coming from, and it's coming down. So for example, this project, we don't want shadows, but if you did want shadows, you know, you could have shadows, but we don't want shadows. So if we click play now on our world 2, you kind of see it gives it like more of a, like, that's a little bit too blue, to be honest. Maybe we go with a darker blue. Maybe we make it a bit more transparent. Maybe we make it more of a blue color, a bit transparent. Let's see how this looks. That looks a lot better, but you kind of see how our Godot icon now is like really bright. So now we can go back to our world environment. We can come over here. We can turn the intensity of our glow down a bit, maybe to like 0.8. Let's see what happens there. It changes the entire look of the game, but you can kind of see that we have like a blue effect to our game, and like our game is like, it feels like it's like, in my opinion, it feels like it's like blue, which it is blue, but it feels like there's like moonlight coming through, you know? Like it feels like moonlight is seeping through from different parts of the cave, and it just like gives it this like environmental feel. But there isn't really much you can do with the directional light 2D except for mess with the shadows and the color. So it is for sure the most basic Godot 2D lighting node, but it really can affect like the feel of each scene, just like we have here. So I recommend playing around with it. Okay, so that's the basics of lighting here in Godot covered, and I hope that you were able to learn something from that. Maybe just get you into lighting and try and get you to understand the importance of lighting. Maybe just understand how to use the basic lighting nodes. But I really do hope this video was able to provide you some sort of value. Now, I want to go over some lighting tips that you should know that I think are going to be really helpful whenever you go about creating lighting in your own projects. Just to keep in mind, just keep these in mind. It's going to be 4 things, and that is: 1, creating lighting in Godot is just like every other game dev thing. You must tweak it over and over until you get it to look right. Number 2, don't try and force different lighting techniques just because they worked for someone else. For example, some games don't actually need shadows, so it may actually hurt the look of your game to add them. Number 3, when adding lights to your scene, be sure to stop and think about the mood that light is giving to the scene. Is it giving a happy, fun mood, scary or mysterious mood, maybe a curiosity mood, or maybe even a beware mood? Just try and think about what the lights are telling the player and how you want the player to feel when they're in that scene, and that's what you need to make the lighting reflect. And number 4, most importantly, if you're unsure, get feedback. And if you don't know how to do something, ask questions. Feedback and asking questions are the best way to improve. But that is all I have for you today. I hope I was able to help you out a bit with learning the basics of lighting here in Godot. Remember, if you have any questions, then let me know in the comments down below and I'll be sure to get back to you and help you out. Remember that a more complex lighting tutorial is coming soon, so thank you so much. And it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe to help out other aspiring game developers. Thank you again, stay safe, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.